Hey, I'm Mark Colgan and welcome to this 4-part cold email crash course video series. Over the next 4 videos, we're going to be covering everything that you need to know to launch a successful cold email campaign. Whether your goals are to generate leads and clients, or even with acquiring new partners, maybe even recruiting or raising funds, you'll have everything that you need to plan and launch these campaigns. I've spent the last several years building and launching my own cold email campaigns and optimizing hundreds of campaigns for B2B companies, which has generated millions in net new revenue. The goal with this video series is to cover the A to Z of cold email, and for me to share all of my experience and lessons learned throughout the videos. In the first of 4 videos, we're going to focus on the overall prospecting strategy and the approach that we should take with the campaign. We'll also cover the importance of ideal customer profiles and the buyer personas, and why knowing these is going to make your email campaigns a lot easier for you to produce. We'll also cover things like the technical setup of the domain and mailbox strategy. So whether you're a beginner or an advanced cold emailer, there'll be something new that you could learn in this video series. We've also built a playbook, which I'll be sharing in just a second, which is available for you to make a copy of. Throughout the playbook, you'll see that there's different sections. Within each section, there's different prompts. And we've also created some action items for you and some additional resources for you so that you can read to implement into your own campaign that's specific for your business and your goals. So let's get started. Right, we're in the playbook, and as you can see, part 1 is all about the prospecting strategy and the prospects. Now, a lot of people are quite keen to send their first emails and send that email to thousands of people, but we really encourage you not to skip this step. We first need to plan our campaign and fully understand who are we trying to send these emails out to. For context for this video series, I also want to share that we're just focusing on one specific campaign to one persona. This isn't going to cover how you can send multiple sequences, but what we'll teach you is how you can create one cold email campaign. Once you know how to do that, you can just simply recreate the campaigns for the other personas that you may want to target. So really what we want to focus on is our approach. And there's 2 ways of thinking, mostly 2 ways of thinking about cold email. There's a manual and then there's an automated approach. And really gone are the days where you could send the same email to thousands of prospects. You know, a lot of people did this 7, 8, 9 years ago and it never truly worked, but however, you would get replies. However, in 2023, moving into 2024, it just doesn't work that way. So there's 2 ways to think about it, manual and automated. Manual is really where you create individual emails for each prospect that you want to reach out to, but these can be very time consuming. Oftentimes you have to do a lot of research to add that into the email. And it can only really work if you have a larger average deal size and a total addressable market which might be a bit smaller. So as in each email that is sent, you can clearly see that it was 100% personalized to that individual. Automated emails, on the other hand, is when you send a similar message to a segmented list of prospects, which includes some personalization, like their first name, company name, or even their job title, or other variables that you've been able to find in your research. This approach is more appropriate for companies that have a smaller average contract value and a larger total addressable market. So this table below just represents how you could think about the different approaches. And of course, there is some room in the middle for a hybrid approach where you have a medium average contract value and a medium total addressable market. In this case, you can use a combined approach, and we'll cover this more in the personalization and relevance section later in the workbook. Another thing that you need to think about is the campaign mindset. So to be successful with your cold email campaigns today, you need to adopt this campaign mindset. And what we mean by that is just treating each sequence as its own single campaign. So rather than having one sequence where you send to 5,000 prospects, you'll have dozens of smaller campaigns sent to smaller segments. A recent client of mine is actually getting between 3 and 31% reply rates in his cold emails. He has 4 separate lists. The smallest campaign has only 79 prospects and the largest campaign has 387 prospects. So as you can see, this is very different to the approach that you may have been using already, which is sending one message to thousands of prospects at all. And again, we'll cover this in more detail in the lead research and list building section. One thing that I'm a very strong believer of is relevancy over personalization. So I often speak to my clients and tell them that you can't sell car insurance to somebody who doesn't own a car, which sounds very simple, right? But many people make the mistake of sending the same email to thousands of different people in different roles at various companies in different regions, different geographies, and maybe even different industries. And it simply won't work because that message isn't relevant to that individual. Instead, you need to plan your campaigns to make sure the message is as relevant to each segment as possible. And you can increase the relevancy of your message by focusing on the problems, the pains, and the challenges of your prospects. To understand what those problems, pains, and challenges are, you need to do your research. You need to focus on your ideal customer profiles and also your buyer personas. Personalization can work, don't get me wrong, but if it will only work properly if it's worth the effort and you do it correctly. There are lots of tools out there that offer AI-generated personalization, and if I'm honest with you, I think they miss the mark a little bit. The tools are getting better, and I don't doubt that in the next few years we'll see them improve drastically. But just let me show you an example of a good friend of mine who received a cold email. So there's two things wrong with this example that you can see in the screenshot. So first of all, the person mentioned a football team, and that has nothing to do with the solution that they then go on to pitch. What's worse is Alan is a Spurs fan, which is the arch rival of Arsenal in this case. So this attempt at personalization really backfired, and you definitely don't want to be getting it wrong. So we'll cover the correct ways to personalize emails later in the personalization and relevance section in this workbook. The last thing to consider when you're thinking about your prospecting and cold email strategy is to consider the channels that you're going to use to send emails out. This crash course is solely focused on cold emails, so we won't be covering the other channels. That doesn't mean that you can't include them in your campaigns. However, below is a breakdown of the different channels you can use for outbound prospecting, and what we've tried to do is give you a bit of a steering of which channels can be used based on the monthly retainer, and this goes into what that average deal size or average contract value is. You can see that the lower the average retainer is, then the less channels that you should use, and the higher the average retainer is on a monthly basis, so 20k plus, that could be pounds or dollars, then you might need to consider even doing offline events like events, dinners, or networking events. So we've covered the campaign strategy, we've thought about the approach, we're going to take a relevant over personalization approach to cold emails in this video series. Now it's time to think about our prospects. This section is often overlooked and skipped by those who just want to send emails out, but I do encourage you to spend the time. So there's two things to consider here. There's your ideal customer profile, so known as ICPs, and there's also your buyer personas. The ICP is a term used to define the types of companies that you want to reach out to. So forget the people, forget the individuals at this stage. You need to ask yourself, which companies do we want to work with? Determining your ideal customer allows you to figure out who you should be targeting, not only with your cold emails, but also your marketing and your messaging on your website too. So this might be an activity that if you have a marketing team that you do with them in collaboration. If you're earlier stage and it's just you, then it will be you spending the time going through the ICPs. So when thinking about your ICP, you need to consider the following. Firmographic information such as industry, geography. Do you only target certain countries? The size of the business. Is it annual revenue? Is it by number of employees, number of offices? Let's say, for example, you sell HR software and it's £3 or £4 or dollars per seat, then clearly you'd want to be targeting companies that have 250 plus employees rather than companies that only have 3 or 5 employees. And again, this all informs your strategic targeting for your campaigns. Really important to note though that your ICPs can change over time, and you can also run new campaigns to different ICPs in the future. That's totally fine. But to make your cold email campaign successful, I encourage you to focus on just one ICP and one buyer persona at a time. Other things you consider is technographics, so what technology do they use, and is it relevant to your service or your product offering? Let's say that you sell a service which is to help people with HubSpot implementation and optimization, HubSpot being a well-known CRM. Now, if a company is using Salesforce, you can't work with them because you're a HubSpot consultant. So to form your ICP, you'd want to only focus on HubSpot users. Going back to that point I made about you can't sell car insurance to someone who doesn't have a car, that's a perfect example of this. There's also some business-related questions that you can ask yourself, such as what's their immediate business goals, how do these problems impact operations, what would the biggest barrier to them purchasing your product? Now, the ICP process can take a little bit of time, but as I mentioned before, please do not skip it. And we've made it actually a lot simpler for you. We've created a ICP and persona matrix, which I'll share quickly here. And in this ICP matrix, you can see that we've got all of the information that you should try and find out. Now, it's going to be hard sometimes to find out all of these different factors, but do try and focus on the ones that have the asterisks here. These are almost like the must-have that you need to focus on. We've got firmographic and technographic, and then we want you to think about what the company challenges and pain points are. So that could be company-wide. It doesn't specifically have to do with your solution. What are the key trigger events? We're going to cover triggers and signals later in this video series too. It's something that I'm quite passionate about. And then what's really important is that you actually put in some example companies here. So just put the websites of companies. There's no point having an ICP which is just theoretical. You need to find just 5 or 6 different companies so you can actually have a look at their website. This is really useful as well when it comes to writing the messages for the personas. Then you can think about your lead sources and where these people spend time online. So are there directories or communities that these companies belong to? I used to work in the data center design and build world, which is a very, very niche industry. One of the biggest events and one of the best things that for our marketing campaigns was to attend the Data Center World Conference, which happened once a year. So this is how specific you need to be with your ICP, and you can complete this and make a copy. You'll be able to make a copy of this spreadsheet for you to use. So we've covered the companies, the ICPs. Now we're going to talk about the personas, and the personas really mean the individuals that work in the ICP. The aim of understanding your buyer personas is to really understand these individuals and understand their fears and challenges, their roles in the buying cycle, their drivers and motivations, and the problems and issues that they have. This helps you produce messages which are super relevant to their problems and their motivations. It also helps you position your product and service as the service that can soothe the pain or be the painkiller to the pain that they're feeling at the moment. Essentially, you'll use the information that you gather from here to understand what messages to write and what value you can provide to your prospects. And below are just some questions to think about when it comes to your buyer personas. So you want to be able to comfortably describe what a day in their life is. Provide examples of your ideal buyer by linking to their LinkedIn profiles, which I'll share in just a second. Are your buyer personas aware of the pain? What are their aspirations and how do they buy? So just going back to your second action item in the workbook, which is the buyer personas, here is where you take the ICP that you're going to focus on with this one cold email campaign, so the type of company that you want to reach out to, and don't worry if it's narrow. Don't be super broad. Don't just say any company in North America. Is it tech company? Is it manufacturing? Is it chemicals? Whatever those verticals are, keep it as narrow as possible. And then when it comes to your buyer personas, this is where you're looking for the individuals within that narrow company that you focused on in the ICP. So here you want to list down their concerns, their needs, their goals, and where you can find these individuals, what communities, other companies they might follow, what podcasts might they listen to, what influence do they follow on LinkedIn, if they're on LinkedIn, and then also add in the LinkedIn profiles of people who match this persona. And we've got a couple of, I've put in some examples here so you can see this in this page. Again, when you make a copy, by clicking here, you'll be able to get a copy of that spreadsheet. So social proof is also really important when it comes to your messaging. The closer to your customer language that you use in your messaging, the better it will be. It's known as voice of customer. So what you're really looking for is language like, before I used X, I had to do A, B, and C, but now I use Y, my life is better. And this will require you to think about the problems your previous customers solved using your solution and how those problems relate to your prospect's persona. So there are several places that you can find social proof. Look at your case studies, read through them and pull out that key insight, that voice of customer. Look at the testimonials that people may have left on your site before. If you're a little bit earlier stage and you don't have approved case studies or testimonials, then you can use anecdotes, so use case anecdotes. So an example of this is, for me in a previous business of mine, I said that one customer generated over $6,000 in orders from speaking on one podcast during his campaign. Now, he didn't approve that we could use that language, but you can see that's anonymous. It's not talking about the specific customer, his business, or what podcast it was that he spoke on. but we can use this language and use these anecdotes in our email messaging. The last place to look is third-party review sites. Ideally, you'll have your own profile on places like G2 or even in directories like Clutch where you have some testimonials. But if you don't in your very early stage, what I would encourage you to do is look at your competitors or the most competing product or service to you and scan through the way that people are describing the pains and how they solve them, especially if you're offering a very similar service or a very similar product as well. And what I want you to do is note down as many of these use cases, testimonials, the language of your prospects below. And don't worry if you need to increase the space of the table, it will do that for you. Once you've spent time on your ICPs, your buyer personas, and you've got your social proof, you're really starting to be able to form the messaging that you're going to send out in your email campaigns. And I like to call these message themes or campaign themes. So for every campaign, you should complete the table below to help you keep your message very relevant to one specific or two specific problems or pain points that the persona faces, that they might be aware of or unaware of these. So as you'll see in the table, you've got the campaign name, the persona that you're targeting. So remember, just one campaign to one persona of one ICP. What's the number one problem that they're facing? And what's the implication or risk of not solving that problem? What's the second problem and the implication and risk of not solving that second problem? And what social proof do you have to back up how your solution can help them solve the problem that they're facing? So here's an example of an SEO marketing agency. I'll let you take a look at that in your own time. The last section of this video is to talk about the more technical side of the domain and mailbox strategy. Please, again, don't skip this step as it's one of the best ways to ensure that you increase the chances of landing in the primary inbox and not ending up in the spam folder. So one of the things that we recommend is that you use an alternative domain for sending prospecting emails. This mitigates the risk that your primary domain might be blacklisted and important emails such as internal emails to the team or even emails to customers, make sure that they don't land in the spam. And you don't want to be getting this notification from Google. So for each alternative domain, you should use a maximum of 2 mailboxes per domain. It's quite hard saying mailboxes and domains, so I'm going to give some specific examples using one of my businesses. So for agency sales design, my primary domain is agencysalesdesign.com. Therefore, the domains that I'm using to send my cold emails out from are agencysalesdesign.co.uk and agencysalesdesigns.com. So an extra S there. And what happens is I send the cold emails from those emails, and if I ever get blacklisted or put in the spam, I can still send emails from my alternative domains and my primary domain. So when I'm sending an update to a customer, it's not impacted by the fact that that domain has been blacklisted, for example. So when it comes to the mailboxes on each domain, I recommend that you put 2 mailboxes per domain, again, just to spread the risk. So agencysalesdesign.co.uk, I have Mark at and then Mark.Colgan at. It's just me in this business at the moment. And then for agency sales designs, you can see that it follows the same format. It's Mark and Mark.Colgan at. So it's also very important that you shouldn't send more than 40 emails per mailbox per day. When it comes to purchasing these domains, so you want to buy those domains that are similar to your main domain. I've had success with domains like .agency, .tech, but ideally buy .com or .co.uk if that's relevant for you. So if you're, again, using the example of agency sales design, you can use .co or add the S or the agency sales design or try the agency sales design, get the agency sales design, for etc. I recommend using GoDaddy. It's not specifically because it's the best place to buy domains, but the majority of cold email tools and other tools that you'll need to plug into have really good instructions for GoDaddy, as it's one of the largest. You also want to set up Google Workplace. So this is where you can actually send and receive, you can receive the emails. Now, there are changes occurring in the cold email space at the time I record this, especially with Google domains being purchased by Squarespace. So it's a little bit unknown at the moment. So what you may want to do is to hedge your bets and perhaps buy some domains, set up some mailboxes, in Outlook as well as Gmail. But here are some instructions for getting it set up in Workspace. Important that you also authenticate the domains as well. So this is the fun part, and there are 3 parameters that you need to think about. We don't have time in this video to go through all of these things in detail, but it's the SPF, the DKIM. Once you've configured them, you then need to configure your DMARC, and then you also need to set up your domain forwarding as well. What this means is that when you send an email from agencysalesdesign.co.uk, if somebody was to put that into the website browser and they hit enter, it would just be forwarded to my main website so that people aren't getting a 404 error. And there's a guide there for that as well. Lastly, it's very important to warm up your emails. This might be new to some of you may already be familiar with this process, but it helps you increase the chances of deliverability. I recommend that you warm up your emails for at least 3 weeks before starting your campaigns, and you'd want to use a low threshold of maybe 3 to 15 emails per day, per domain or per mailbox, for 3 weeks. And you want to pick a company who can help you with this email warm-up process that owns their warm-up pool and doesn't use client emails in the warm-up process, a company that monitors emails on an ongoing basis and doesn't use bad or blacklisted domains in the warm-up pool. There's a link here for additional tips for helping improve your likelihood of landing in the inbox. And you also want to keep your emails running when your campaign is live as well. So your action items for this part of the part 1 of the workbook is to purchase your alternative domains, authenticate them correctly, set up mail and domain forwarding, and then warm up your emails. And if you need any help with this at all, the team at SendNow can certainly help you with this. So you can just send them an email at team@SendNow and they'll be able to help you get set up with all of your email domains. So that's the end of the first video in this 4-part cold email crash course series. In this video, we covered the overall prospecting strategy and approach you should take, especially thinking about that campaign mindset, how to focus on relevancy over personalization, specifically if you've got a lower average deal size and a larger total addressable market. We also talked about the importance of understanding your ideal customer profiles and buyer personas, and we also touched upon the domain and mailbox strategy as well. In the next video, we're going to be talking about data and research, which is one of my favorite topics. We'll cover the triggers and signals that you can use to find more relevant prospects and also the data points you can use in your email. We'll look at those different data sources that you can use, whether they be a manually created list or a bought list. We'll also talk about lead research companies whose whole job it is to find this data for you and provide you with leads on an ongoing basis. And we'll also cover some important things like email verification as well as segmentation for your campaigns. So I hope you enjoyed this part 1 of this video series, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Cheers.